This is Windshield Hoops. What's going on, everybody? This is Jay Wilder Adams today, alongside, of course, as usual, Zach Radine. How's it going, Zach?
It's going great. Obviously, the Timberwolves have been doing phenomenal. Basketball is fun right now. You got the Final Four coming up this weekend. You got playoffs returning in a few weeks here. Basketball's, I've been really enjoying it, especially with the Timberwolves on a 4-game winning streak. I know you're enjoying that too.
Mm-hmm. I got to celebrate Cat right now. I got to celebrate Cat. Look at this. I found my middle school
OG.
jersey in my
Wow.
locker or in my closet. So I definitely was like, you know what? I'm gonna rep it for this episode because I probably haven't worn this since high school, and it's I would say it's vintage, but it's getting close, right?
Yeah, probably. That's definitely I can't remember when we got away from those jerseys specifically.
I
Like,
remember it was the first Jimmy Butler year
yeah.
because I remember after Cat's second year, that's when they introduced, or at the end of Cat's second year, they introduced the new logos and then the branding and all that stuff kicked in the next year.
Yeah, it makes sense. Because I had a Ricky Rubio jersey like that. I've obviously grown out of that since like fourth grade, but you know, yeah, it's definitely cool to see those again.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I remember I got this in New York in December 2016. That's how long ago it's been.
Wow.
And Zach, I'm not sure if you were following the Timberwolves then, but we stunk still. We were like one of those, like we were like the Orlando Magic this year. Like we were really talented. I mean, like Cat and Wiggins was like way more praised than like Apollo and Franz is right now. Like it
Yeah.
was that praised, and we thought we had the future like combo of the NBA going forward. We had our MVP player in Cat and our like, kind of our Paul George and Wiggins. That was kind of the hope, but obviously that didn't work out. But at that time, Wiggins was playing very well, 23 points per game that year. Cat, he averaged 25 in his second year. Like he was
Nuts.
unbelievable. And yeah, it was a good year. And yeah, just memories. I remember the KP versus Cat debates. I remember how that was hyped. I was actually binge watching some YouTube videos like about that. And good days, good days.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when it was like 2016 GM poll. Cat was the number one player that GMs would build around over
Yeah.
LeBron, over Kevin Durant, over whoever else was like, a top prospect around then. And Wiggins, I remember I posted about this like a Bleacher Report article. The title was, "Is Wiggins the next Kobe?" or something like that.
Oh gosh.
Like,
Yep. That died down a little bit his third year. It died down a little bit. A lot of
yeah,
people thought this is still an all-star player, but it definitely shifted toward Cat was next. I remember the Mike Korzemba YouTube video where he compared him to Tim Duncan, and that might sound crazy now, but that was a very common take at the time.
yeah,
Respect Cat, man. He's still an all NBA player. So
for sure.
respect him. You respect him more than anybody. He's your guy. So
Yeah, he is my
but
guy.
but yeah, we got a good episode today. We just, I guess, walked in memory lane for a moment, but great episode today. We're going to talk a little bit about some of our updated takes on notable March Madness prospects. Zach has quite a few opinions that I'll piggyback on. We'll talk about Brandon Miller versus Scoot Henderson to specify a part of that debate. We're going to talk about the Dallas Mavericks, the Portland Trailblazers, and, we might improvise a little bit, talk about a little more beyond that. We'll see. And we'll do, of course, the weekly Would You Rather Build Around and Stock Riser of the Week. And let's go right there right away. Let's talk about our Stock Risers of the Week. Zach, give me your guys.
All right, for me, I got Jaden Hardy, the second round pick, who was taken. I remember on draft night, the Kings took him and they traded him away to the Mavericks. I remember being really upset for the Kings at that spot. This was back when, we thought the Kings would be like a solid playing team and not like this top 3 seed fighting for home court advantage in the playoffs like they are now, obviously. But Jaden Hardy's been balling out for the Mavericks. He's had several 20-point games in the last few weeks. He's really stepped up as a scorer for them when they needed it. They don't have too many role players on that roster right now, as they traded a lot of, their only good role players away in that Irving deal. And we'll talk about the Mavericks later, I'm sure, too. But Jaden Hardy has really shown up. I think he's going to prove to be maybe one of the best draft picks in the second round in recent years with, his projectile and how good I think he could be. And that's something the Mavericks really need out of him because they don't have too much young talent. I remember when we were doing our 25 and under duos and we had Luca paired with like Josh Green at that time. So they definitely need some under 25 talent. And I think he can be that guy for them.
I love that pick. He definitely deserved this recognition. I think he's dropped. You can correct me on this. He's dropped 20 plus, like in 4 of his last 5 games or something like that. He's
Yeah, I'd
been,
say so.
yeah, it was something of that realm. He recently dropped 20 yesterday from the moment we're recording this, but yeah, he's been really impressive. In high school, might sound funny in foresight, but in hindsight, but I remember coming into the season, I said there's 3 amazing prospects: Chet, Paolo, and Jaden Hardy. And I had Jaden Hardy as my number 2 prospect ahead of Paolo. And I just remember like the range and shot making he displayed. It didn't stand out in the G League. He shot below 40% from the field, barely 30% from 3. And part of it you could say is the spacing, but that really turned off scouts. So he fell all the way down to the second round, which didn't even make sense at the time. And that's proven to be even sillier right now. I mean, he went back to the G League earlier this year and just absolutely dominated. He didn't belong there. And now in the NBA, he's dropping 20 consistently. And I think he's going to end up proving to be closer to the top 3 player in the class than he will be the 37th player in the class.
Yeah, I remember he was, I think number 3 on my board, like right before the college seasons and all that started. And then it was a steady fall off, throughout the season. He was
Yeah.
really inefficient. You didn't see the defense there. I kind of wish he would have went the college route, but like, yeah, it was a really disappointing season for him. And yeah, teams probably overreacted. I remember I think he was like in the late teens on my draft board. Like I probably would have taken
Yeah.
him like a few spots maybe out of the lottery still because I
Mm-hmm.
mean it was clear the talent was there, the upside was there. Just he needed development. I can understand why good teams maybe wouldn't take that because most good teams aren't really going to be willing to bring in what was an inefficient score that really doesn't maybe on the NBA level project to do as much other than score and shot create for you.
Yeah.
So, some team had to take a shot on him in the second round, and that's just where his value fell to, I guess.
Yeah, I'm looking for my old big board that I posted the night before the draft. And I'm still looking for it. I post a lot. Sheesh. Um, Going back and back in time. Okay, found it. I had him 17th on my board. So I agreed. I thought he was a late teens guy. I would have taken him as high as 12, and I would have taken him as low as the early 20s. Like that was kind of my range for him, if my memory is correct. By the way, I did a good job with my board outside of Walker Kessler. Yeah. Outside,
Big time.
I had Walker Kessler 48, which is absolutely nasty work by me. But
That was like
out-
everybody.
outside of that, I had Chet 1, I had Paolo 2. It was 1A, 1B for me. I had
Mhm.
Jabari 3, Hardy 4, Dern 5, Keegan 6, AJ 7, Sharp 8, Usman Jiang 9, we'll see there. Malachi Branham 10, Johnny Davis 11. Everybody missed on that.
Yeah.
Benedict Mathurin 12. Like, I think I think early in the year that would have looked really dumb, but I think after his rookie season, it's not crazy anymore, even though he should still be higher. And
Mhm.
then go down and down the list. I had Jalen Williams 14, which is a hot take at the time, until Sam Presti took him 12, which some people thought that was a reach. That was the right pick, obviously. So
Very obviously. He's been balling, dude. Holy crap.
yeah, he's been really good. But back to the topic. Yeah, Jaden Hardy is absolutely fantastic. And my my player is for stock riser of the week is Austin Reeves. I feel like everybody's already labeled him as stock riser of the week across the country without knowing what the segment is. So we've
Yep.
only heard about Austin Reeves for the past couple weeks. It's just kind of like if I not didn't include him, that would kind of be just hate. So I think he had to be included here. Since March 5th, he's averaging 18.4 points per game and 6.5 assists. I mean, since LeBron went down, he was a legitimate above average starter who was dropping 24 and 35 on a couple occasions. A little bit of a free throw merchant. I'm sure he wouldn't be quite as productive as if he was playing in like Portland or Detroit, or Minnesota, right? Because he's definitely getting a favorable whistle. To be fair, he was a excellent foul drawer in college, but still, right? Like you probably wouldn't get that whistle. But besides the point, excellent size, solid secondary playmaking. He's tough. He can shoot off the dribble. He can get to the line, and he's not afraid of contact. He's a really good player, and I would say an upside comparison if he reaches like a pretty high end of himself. I think Spencer Dinwiddie's a good comp for him. You know, they're both about 6'5". They both do very similar things. I think Spencer's a better space creator. His handle's a little tighter and he's a little stronger. I would say Austin Reeves is a little more crafty around the rim and stuff like that. But I think that's a very good comp for Austin Reeves. And the Lakers definitely, say what you want about the Lakers. If you're a lover, if you're a hater, Austin Reeves was definitely a top 20 player in that draft minimum. And like based on his career so far, he's been top 12 in that draft. And it's a great get for the Lakers undrafted.
He's a very efficient 3-level scorer. You know, I think he's definitely got it mentally. I believe he's going to get paid this offseason. I think this is his year where he can get paid. So I don't know what type of money he's looking at. It's probably going to be a pretty good amount. I remember he had an interview recently talking about how much, the money matters, which obviously that matters a ton. And he's going to maximize like whatever he can get, which is very smart. And he's probably going to cost a lot. The Lakers should retain him. He's been a very valuable piece to them. And, he can be a great piece for them next year too, because, as we've talked about in the past, if the Lakers can, start the year out healthy next season, they could be one of the better teams in the Western Conference maybe. And he would definitely be a big piece of that. And they're going to need to retain him.
Yeah, no doubt. I think he's eligible for up to 4 years, $50 million, if I'm correct. I think that's the number.
I think so.
So yeah, that feels like a pretty reasonable contract for him. I don't think this is like out. Like you hear Linsanity run, and Jeremy Lin was still a solid player. Don't get me wrong, right? But I don't think this is a massive fall-off situation. Do I think he's going to be an 18-7 guy rest of his career? No, I don't. I think this is a very good 3-week stretch for him. But he's definitely a very good player, and 4 years, 50 makes a lot of sense. You just hope for the Lakers that you're extending D'Lo probably this summer. You're extending Jared Vanderbilt, I would assume, and you're probably keeping Malik Beasley, but I think Austin Reeves would be ahead of Malik Beasley on the priority list, especially with guys like Max Christie kind of growing up off the bench in the background. So I would guess he is a priority for the Lakers. You just hope for them he isn't out of their price range.
And they also have Hachimura, but there's a lot of controversy with him not making the rotation in their loss to the Bulls. Yep. And when they're fully healthy, I mean, earlier in the year he'll probably be in the rotation every night. But at this point in the season, when you're trying to limit your rotation to 9 guys, I don't know if he makes it, because honestly, when I look at that Lakers roster, they actually have pretty solid depth, and
they do.
Obviously, the problem with them, though, they can't stay healthy. So you're not going to see many games with that depth in full use.
Yeah.
So Rui would probably play a lot still. Like I would probably bet the under on 10.5 games with D'Lo, LeBron, and AD playing in the same night next year together. Like that's how bad the injuries have been for those guys. All 3 of those guys have legit injury concerns.
10 games though? You don't think they can get 20?
Probably. I really don't think they could.
That's low. That's really low. That's low. 10.5 it's miniature. It's really small.
I would honestly be surprised if they went over 10.5.
Yeah, that would be a disaster for them. I would guess, if I had to guess personally, I think they play 24,
maybe
closer
to 20.
But 10 would be bad. That's a pretty injury-riddled season. And hey, LeBron's 38. I think 37, 38, somewhere in that range. Anthony Davis, I mean, we know his history. D'Lo is one of those guys where if he's a little banged up, he's out for 3 weeks. It's a weird situation. He doesn't like playing through bruises and stuff. So we remember that history. But yeah, it's the thing with Rui, before we move on, is the Lakers team is deep, like you said. It's very deep. I mean, we can go top to bottom with D'Lo, Troy Brown, Austin Reeves, right? Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, you go LeBron, AD, Mo Bamba, you go on and on that roster. The thing with Rui Hashimura is he might be a better individual player than Malik Beasley certain nights, but it's all about, okay, who's fitting with LeBron? And the thing with Rui Hashimura that makes him a problematic role player a lot of times is what does he do super well that just puts him on the floor next to superstars? Like he's not a great shooter. His best shot, he's a very good mid-range shooter, but who cares when you're a role player, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's a okay defender, not a great defender. He's not a great shot. Like, what does he do to play next to a LeBron? Malik Beasley, he's going to hit threes. Jared Vanderbilt is going to lock you up and play fast with energy and transition. And then D'Angelo Russell, he does everything as a secondary combo playmaker who could play off of LeBron, right? Like, all those guys have a purpose. Austin Reeves, obviously. So Rui Hashimura just feels like the odd man out. Like Troy Brown Jr. Is Rui Hashimura a better player than Troy Brown? Probably. But Troy Brown hits open threes. Troy Brown provides a pulse defensively. So there's elements here that make him a weird fit.
Like he's a really solid player all around. But yeah, like you said, historically, LeBron succeeds with shooters around him. And no matter how bad Malik Beasley is at everything else in basketball, he's a good shooter, and that's what's going to keep him on the court.
Yeah, no doubt at all. And it's time to shift topics right here. So let's talk about the Dallas Mavericks, Zach. It's not looking good. They just beat Indiana from the moment we're recording this yesterday, but they dropped 2 against Charlotte and are 7-13 since Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving teamed up. How bad is it?
It's not looking good. I'll just say my take right off the top. If this team doesn't make a deep playoff run, I'm 100% convinced that Irving's gone. I don't think he's going to stay in Dallas. And I know you've put this take out too. I think Luka Doncic could very well be out of Dallas if that happens because, it would be an absolute dumpster fire. They have already $108 million on the books next year, and you still have you have guys like Wood, Powell, and there was one other free agent that they have next year. Irving. Yeah, Irving, of course. So you have 3 of your top 5 or 6 guys on your team that are free agents, and you already have $108 million in the books. That's going to be rough. I don't think that they get all 3 of those guys back, and they don't really have cap space to go out and get, a few solid role players. They missed on JaVale McGee last offseason.
Yeah, that was bad. That was a bad signing.
Which, it was going to fill a need at the time, but he has not worked out for them, and he's got 2 more years left on that contract. I don't know. I think this Dallas team could be a real dumpster fire in a year if they can't figure it out the rest of the year, which they have the talent. And when you have Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, I think you can figure it out. I think this team could, make the playoffs still and give a team a problem in the first round because you have those guys. But the surrounding players around that are not good. They're the 8th best offense in basketball and the 21st best defense in basketball since the Irving trade.
24th.
Yeah, that's not really a combination to winning a playoff series. You're not the Kings. You're like the reason why I think the Kings could win a playoff series because they're the best offense in basketball, despite their defensive concerns.
And
while the Mavericks, they'll be like an average offensive team in the playoffs, and they'll be one of the worst defensive teams. So I don't know. It's a tough situation in Dallas.
Yeah, I'm with you. I am absolutely with you. I like Kyrie Irving. That's definitely a concern, but everything is in the context of what's happening with Luka Doncic. That's the context that matters by far the most. And here's the reality with Luka Doncic. They brought in Kristaps Porzingis 3 years ago. That didn't work out. They brought him in, or they dealt him for a relatively underwhelming package. Davis Bertans is another bloated contract that they're taking in on that roster right now. And Spencer Dinwiddie, who was a good player, but, he's a good player. That's really as far as it goes. And Then Jalen Brunson breaks out in the playoffs. Brunson breaks out. They let him go for nothing because they didn't want to pay him $100 million. And now Jalen Brunson, who cares about labels? He's an all-star. He should have
And he's
made the all-star
underpaid.
team this year. And now he should have been a max player in the grand scheme of things. So you let Brunson and KP go for basically Davis Bertans and Kyrie Irving. So, like, if you look at the grand scheme, they traded a first-round pick. They traded first-round picks, Kristaps Porzingis and Jalen Brunson and Dorian Finney-Smith for Kyrie Irving. So the Kyrie Irving trade by itself is actually pretty good value. I like they rolled that dice because they had to. Their backs were so far against the wall, they had to do something. But
I
like
agree.
when you consider the context of the Brunson and losing KP, and both are having great years, like it's just been incompetent. It's been incompetent. It's been a problem this season, and now this team is positioning itself in the short term this year. I don't believe in the Dallas Mavericks. I don't believe in this team. You want to hear a really weird stat? This team, since the acquisition, has played 15 clutch games. They're 4-11 in these clutch games. They have no clue how to close these games. And look, Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, they need to figure out how to play next to each other, all those things. But here are the other problems. They don't know how to get stops. When you watch the team in terms of intangibles on the basketball court, the level of focus, the level of intensity is not there. More often than not, they're not coming in with the higher end veracity compared to the other team late in games. And I think when you lose 2 games to the Charlotte Hornets, that is an indictment on your intensity, on your focus. This is a team that is incredibly unfocused, a team that has no defense surrounded by 2 offensive juggernauts who don't know how to play with each other, and that takes time. But having bad defense around 2 offensive firepower players, that is bad. So Dallas is at a weird spot too, because now Luka Doncic is saying cryptic comments we haven't heard him really say before. Like him saying, like, I'm gonna paraphrase this. I'm not playing with the same joy right now. I'm not feeling the same fun and energy playing with the Mavericks. Like that was my interpretation. If people had other interpretations, they can DM me. But it just the vibes and the fact I made a video a while ago. Like I don't think this is the top 9 team in the West when healthy as it is. It's a bad look, and there's minimal assets going forward. Look, I think, if you ask me right now, I think they keep Kyrie Irving this summer because where does Kyrie Irving go?
Yeah.
Where does he go?
That's true.
So that's where I'm looking at it. So Dallas has got to get his stuff together this summer. Got to figure out, like, okay, who are the right people around Luka Doncic? How can we acquire more defense around this team? JaVale McGee, that was a swing. That was a rim protector they wanted. They missed on that. Great. They let go of their best wing defender, Dorian Finney-Smith. Spencer Dinwiddie gives more defensively than Kyrie Irving. And Dallas was a bad defensive team before letting those 2 guys go. So it's bad. And one last thing I want to say on this topic, we also need to hold Luka Doncic accountable too. I think he needs accountability. Like if we're going to hold him to the standard of being the young player that the NBA is going to market itself around to be the new LeBron after LeBron leaves, right? Like we did the redraft of the last 5 drafts, so we just put Luka Doncic automatic 1, right? That happened. And I don't think it should be as firm right now because 1, we've talked about it. I have concerns about how Luka Doncic plays the game of basketball. I think it's way too heliocentric. He doesn't bring anything defensively. And in addition, I am questioning Luka Doncic as a leader. Very much so. I'm not watching these games and thinking, okay, Luka Doncic is elevating his team. More often with his antics with the officiating, I am thinking he's deflating the morale around him. So Luka Doncic, he's got to get his stuff in order. He's a great individual player, but he's a one-way player. He doesn't play off the ball. And now we've had 2 stars with Luka Doncic leave him and go play better somewhere else. We need to have this talk too. Luka Doncic, Dallas could very much lose Luka Doncic in the next 2 years with how poorly they manage this team around him. But Luka Doncic deserves accountability as well.
Yeah, 100%. And if they can manage to keep Kyrie Irving, my biggest question is just how they're going to get those role players around those 2. Like maybe you can somehow do a sign and trade with Christian Wood to get assets, but they just don't have the cap space right now, and I don't know how many guys you can get on biannual deals and vet minimums and MLE deals to really make this team complete. Like you had the superstars at the top. You have Doncic and Irving. You just need to really fill it out around those guys, and those guys need to figure it out too together. Like 4-11, that's crazy in the clutch. Like I
Yeah.
remember when they played the Timberwolves, they were like deferring to each other. They didn't. I mean, it made more sense then, but they're still kind of doing it. Like they don't know what each player's role is in those situations, and I don't know. It's kind of hard to watch in those situations. I remember against the Hornets a few days ago. I think Doncic took several step back deep threes in a
Hmm.
row. Like they don't play smart. They just take bad shots in the clutch a lot.
Yeah.
They're trying to make harder plays than they're just not trying to make the easy play a lot of times. It's just I don't know where this team goes from here. I'm really interested to see how like their last 6, 7 games or how many, games they have left, how that goes. I think they'll probably still make the playoffs. I would pick them to make the playoffs still. I think Doncic and Irving can give you 1 and 2 good games in the playing tournament. Maybe only they
But
need
they can
one.
also not.
Yeah, they
Like
also cannot.
if they're not if they're not excellent, there's a good chance. Look, the playing tournament might be as good as the top four this year in the West. I mean,
Yeah.
like two out like New Orleans might have Zion back.
Hmm.
Golden State might be in the play-in. Minnesota might be in the play-in. Like it's not just going to be Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving can outscore these guys. The Lakers, I didn't even mention the Lakers.
Yep.
The play-in tournament's brutal this year, and I don't think they're better than any of those teams I mentioned. So yeah, Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving could totally put together two just unreal games and be unstoppable. But I think if we're looking at probability, it's almost as likely as they don't click in those moments. And if they aren't excellent, how does Dallas beat a team like Golden State or LA or Minnesota?
Yeah, I don't think they'd beat. I think maybe they could have a chance against LA, but I'd be really surprised if they could beat Minnesota or
LA's a better
the
team, man.
Warriors.
LA's a better team.
Yeah. I have really big questions about Dallas's rim protecting in general. Like, who's their best rim protector? Is it
Dwight
Wood?
Powell,
Like Powell? Like, I don't know. That's really bad too. That's
it's
one of my
bad.
big questions for them.
Yeah.
And they don't have like many. I mean, their defense is just garbage in general. But they don't have really any point of attack defenders. Like Reggie Bullock's your best point of attack
Yeah.
defender. Like that's who's going to be guarding.
Josh
Maybe
Green. Josh Green is their
yeah,
best.
Josh Green, like that's who's going to be guarding potentially Stephen Curry in the play-in tournament, or Anthony Edwards or whoever they would play against.
Yeah.
Like probably going to get cooked most likely if that happens. We'll see.
I would
Um,
I would personally be surprised if Dallas makes the playoffs. I would personally be surprised.
yeah,
I don't know what they're not even the play-in tournament right now.
yeah, I think they're 11, right?
They're 11, right? They could
Yeah,
very much just not even make the play-in tournament.
yeah.
And I don't think they're better than any team that's in the play-in right now or a team that could slide into the play-in. And like that's a problem. And I think we're going to have more discussions about the Mavericks' future this summer, more likely than not. And Dallas, you got to pick a path. Like you traded one first-round pick for Kyrie Irving. That's great. Now you got three more to trade. Do you trade three more and get a squad around them? Is Christian Wood really the answer as your third player? So this team needs to find rim protection. This team needs to find another point of attack defender, and honestly, just hope it clicks. Like a Luka Doncic to Kyrie Irving team, I do question the leadership of that team regardless. Maybe adding another grown up to that locker room could be big. So yeah, they're in a bad situation right now, and it could be all fine. They got a generational player with a generational ceiling, but they got to make quick moves because so far, I don't think there's been a team in the NBA that has managed their assets more poorly than Dallas has in its last 15 months.
Oh, and yeah, by the way, I looked at the Tankathon odds. Um, what is Dallas's pick this year? Top 14 protected,
Top 10 protected.
top 10 protected, because right now they have the 11th best odds, so that pick will be going to New York.
Hey, maybe they get Victor Wembanyama and we're not having this conversation.
Yeah.
Then it's the best situation in the NBA. You
Yeah.
know, like you never know.
Yeah, Irving would be saying if they got that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
There's your rim protection answer.
but like right now, They're projected to give New York a back end lottery pick. Like
Mm-hmm.
the Knicks continue to benefit off of Dallas's issues in the front office. First, you get Brunson, who's underpaid right now. He's one of the best guards in basketball since the new year. Then
Yeah.
you potentially get a lottery pick. I don't know, but
People want to
yeah,
talk
Dallas.
about they want to talk about Minnesota and Utah making trades. Let's talk about Dallas and New York. How about that?
Yep.
Now Dallas you got work to do. But let's talk about another team that might have work to do. Portland. Shams reported today. We're recording. Just a reminder, it's Tuesday, March 28th. Shams reported that Damian Lillard is officially shut down for the season, and it's gonna be interesting what happens this summer. I think every year the last 3 years we've talked about Damian Lillard getting traded or whatnot, but it hasn't happened. And honestly, we haven't had any progress in terms of will it happen. We'll see. But Zach, what should Portland do here?
Portland's continuing to do themselves a disservice by not getting off of Damian Lillard right now. This team needs to take advantage of getting a Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, Kevin Durant type package for Damian Lillard while they still can. The time's kind of running out. Dame's getting a little older. You have to get this package while you still can, while Dame is still at this insane All-NBA level, because he's not going to be like this forever. I know you want to, keep the guy that's been so loyal to you and is your, best player in franchise history. And, he's your franchise leader. He's a top 10 3-point makes, guy in NBA history as well. He's done a lot of things for you. You went to the Western Conference Finals with him, but it's time. The only situation where I'm like, keep him is if they win the lottery and get Wembanyama.
Why are you stealing my takes today?
No,
Like you've been going through my Instagram the last week and just stealing my takes. The last topic, now this, bro. What are you doing? You're stealing my fire. Oh my goodness.
Because I wanted to attach this to, like, even if they got pick number 2 and got Scoot Henderson. Like, if you get Scoot Henderson, I'm like, trade Dame and build around Scoot. Like, the only situation where I think it would make sense to keep him is if you landed Wembanyama. And I think, that's a take that everyone would probably share, because then you can, build what I think would be a pretty quick All-NBA player in Wembanyama. With Dame, I think you could actually have something there. But other than that, if you get 2, please don't take Brandon Miller and try to build Brandon Miller around Dame. That's not going to work. Work to the point where you can win a championship. Like, anything other than number 1, like you posted about, trade him.
Zach, you are something. Okay.
I'm a take stealer.
You are a take stealer. You're going to prison for that. But yeah, I can't disagree because you're just echoing right now. Zach. Okay. Yeah, it's bad. I'm not sure. Push comes to shove. That's what I was going to say. The only way Portland could build a championship roster in the Damian Lillard era is if they land the number 1 overall pick. Not only because of Victor Wembanyama, I would just take him. I would just take him because he's the best prospect in our lifetime, probably, right? I'll just take him and then go from there. Maybe he's ready with Dame. Maybe he's not. I don't know. But you take him usually. But nonetheless, that number 1 pick is a top 5 asset in the NBA. Right away. That is a top 5 asset, even if you consider trading it. We've had GMs say in the past they would trade 12 first-round picks if they're allowed to for that. So
makes sense.
Like, if you were crazy enough to trade the deal, you'd probably get enough to build a championship around the Damian Lillard era back. Like, there's a good probability of that just because of how valuable that asset is. But like I said, I would take Victor number 1 and just go from there. And if Dame fits him, great. Then it could be a Tim Duncan Kawhi situation, even though Dame's not Tim Duncan, but you get what I mean. And then if not, then you trade Dame and then just move toward the Victor era. So I think that's the only way. Like, if you got the number 2 overall pick, the number 2 pick this year is really valuable. Don't get me wrong. It's very valuable. But at the same time, like, it's it's significantly less valuable enough where whatever you get back for 2, I don't think is going to build a championship team with a team that has a long way to go. Unless like Shaden Sharp takes the Tracy McGrady arc, which I don't expect, but I don't know. His tools are so insane, you never know. And, like I just think if they don't land the number 1 pick, it's almost impossible to build a championship team around Dame. And then it goes to the decision, like, let's be realistic with ourselves. He's in his mid-30s. He's a small guard. What are the odds you're building a championship team with him? And do you prioritize just keeping him just because he's a market guy and accepting you're not winning a championship? Or do you just trade him and just best from both sides, give Dame a chance, but also deal him while he is at his peak value? That's what Portland has to figure out. But like I said, the only way they can win a title in the Damian Lillard era, Zach, because you wanted to say it, is if they land the number 1 overall pick. And hey, I think they have the 6th best odds. And at the end of it, I think they'll end up with the 5th best odds. So it's very possible. So that's something to look out for.
They actually just overtook the Magic for the 5th best odds in the draft. So yeah, they got a top 5 pick. But they're positioned to have a top 5 pick right now. Obviously, probably a little more likely that they end up around 5 compared to 1. But we'll see. You could really land a really nice prospect to help build your hopefully your new future around. Whether it's Wembanyama, which obviously we've said you keep Dame in that situation, but more likely if you trade Dame, try to build on somebody like Scoot. Maybe Amen Thompson could be a pillar for you. Asor Thompson, Cam Whitmore, Drace Walker, any of those guys really. I'm sure we're talking about prospects there. I forgot to mention Brandon Miller as well. Like
you mentioned
they're gonna get a good prospect. And my worry, if I had to make a prediction right now, this is what Portland's gonna do. They're gonna get the 6th pick and they're gonna take Drace Walker, and they're going to keep Dame and build the team. They're gonna keep trying to build a team around Dame.
I'm not going to predict. It's the lottery, man. I've said my take on the Bulls. Yeah. I'm not going to make a take on that.
He's so set in stone.
And by the way, I promise that I wasn't ignoring you when the camera went off. I was probably just like picking my nose in the background, but I'm just kidding. But no, having a bad hair day, whatever. But I we'll see with the lottery. This Portland team, I think in these final 6 games, I just want to see just keep feeding Shaden Sharp the basketball. He's been really impressive these past 4 games. He's averaging over 20 in those 4 games, and he is displaying some of those freakish, superhuman, supernatural flashes athletically, but he's also hitting step backs, he's hitting pull-ups, and he's getting these 20-point games efficiently, and his handle isn't even good yet. Like, his handle still has a way to go, and he's still getting these crazy shots. So Shaden Sharp, I want to see how his development is these next 6 games, because I think his development is going to be a big storyline heading into the offseason for Portland. Like, if Shaden Sharp is excellent going into the end of the season, maybe the talk is, I don't know, it could be spun in 2 ways. Do we just lean into the Shaden Sharp era? Or does this mean that Shaden Sharp is ready to win with Dame? I think that his play these next 6 games is really going to alter the overall approach and vision Portland has in the immediate future. Obviously, long-term, he's a big priority for them. But, going into next year, is Shaden Sharp ready to win next year? Is Shaden Sharp almost ready to lead this team? And what should we do based on that?
Let's say he continues that and Portland, shocks the world and actually trades Lillard. They get 4 picks, some solid players, and maybe they get, Amen Thompson or Brandon Miller to fill next to Simons and Sharp and a few other solid players in that core. How good do you feel about that team?
They're a young team. They won't be very good next year. I mean, they got Amen Thompson, Brandon Miller. I think Brandon Miller is the safe guy. I think he probably fits better next to Simons and Sharp, but at the same time, Portland wouldn't have a true playmaker in that lineup because Simons is more of a shot maker. And we'll see how the Simons and Sharp backcourt is long-term because there's not a lot of playmaking there. Is
Mhm.
Simon set up to be a Jordan Poole, like 6-man type player? Like that is still, I think the jury's still out there because after his excellent start to the season, he wasn't great after. So I think that jury's still out. But yeah, I think if you're starting those guys, Brandon Miller would fit better with those two. And they'll probably win a little more right now than with Ahmed Thompson. But then you also have like the idea of, okay, what if we get this freaky dynamic athlete next to Shaden Sharp? That might be the funnest like bad team in the league next year with crazy upside going forward. Kind of like Wiggins and Levine 2.0, like something like that. So that
Yeah,
would be really fun. But
I would
yeah, I
agree.
mean, a lot rests on how Shaden Sharp finishes the season and what happens in the lottery. I think whoever lands the number one pick this year, all of a sudden the vision changes. Very that much that simple, and that includes Portland.
Yeah, I agree for sure.
And let's move on from that and talk. We talked a little bit about Brandon Miller and let's bring this into the context. So you know this, Zach, like up until very recently, Scoot Henderson, because he's had an up and down season and he was a little bit injured this year. I think he missed 25 games and he got shut down after. His stock went down a little bit, but not by much. And Brandon Miller's stock just flown up to the point where we're starting to see a little bit of Brandon Miller to number 2 overall pick mocks. And I just want to hear your opinion on the Scoot Henderson versus Brandon Miller take. And I swear to Christmas, if you steal all of my takes again, I am after you.
I promise I won't. But yeah, I don't get how all that started. It really all started with who's the Gavoni, yeah. Gavoni went on ESPN and started talking about, Brandon Miller and, how he could be like a better fit for teams at 2. And I mean that's a very few select teams. Like the Pistons, yeah, sure. You already have Cade and Ivy, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Like, yeah, Brandon Miller makes more sense there for sure. I don't know if I can really name another team where that's like the same type problem, because I think Scoot is a big upgrade over a lot of other teams concerns
Maybe
with already having multiple
Indiana.
guards. Yeah,
Indiana.
maybe.
I
But
mean,
even
if
like
they keep
I don't
Dame,
know.
then yeah, those are the only teams I can mention.
Yeah. Like I don't think it's that big of a deal. Like some people are acting like every team has like a bunch of guards and they couldn't use a Scoot Henderson. Um but yeah, I just don't get it. Like I think Scoot is just I think he's clearly the number 2 guy, and you can't tell me that a team wouldn't be giving you a lot to trade up, even 1 or 2 picks to go get that guy, where you can collect a lot of assets and go back a little bit and maybe get like somebody like Cam Whitmore. Like
Yeah.
that could be a better move for some teams. Like, yeah, I think Brandon Miller is better than Cam Whitmore, but what about Cam Whitmore plus a first round draft pick and maybe a player? Like teams will legitimately trade up and use a lot of assets to come up and get a Scoot Henderson. Like he is one of the best guard prospects we've seen in a long time come out of this draft. Some people would take him number 1 in some previous draft classes. Like he's a legit guy that I think is going to be an all NBA player within his first, 4 or 5 years of his career. Like I think he could get there pretty quickly. And I think he can do a lot for you in the court. I think he can average over 20 a game and be your lead facilitator while playing nice defense. I like his tools. He's a really athletic 6'2" guard with a big, 6'9" wingspan, I believe it is. I don't know. I feel like people are really we're downplaying Miller's concerns and just we're shooting everything they could, every bullet they could at Scoot for no reason. It didn't make sense to me.
I totally agree with you, Zach. And we do this in scouting media all the time. We have 2 guys that we lock in for 3-4 years. We know about these guys for a long time. And I think this happens in football. This happens in basketball. I'm not sure if it happens in baseball or not. I don't know. I can name recent examples in football like Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence. All of a sudden, Zach Wilson flies up the draft board, right? They don't look at Zach Wilson's erratic nature as a problem, and they overlook at Justin Fields and his raw throwing mechanics, right? And in basketball, it happened to a lower extent with Jabari Smith versus Paolo and Chet. Paolo and Chet were the clear number 1, number 2 guys for a long time. And then for some reason, after a very good freshman season, a lot of people in the media said Paolo's stock is dropping because they question his shooting and they question I don't know, his focus or something like that. And then Jabari Smith flies up with a comparable season. Like he deserved to be in that conversation. But then people were saying like Jabari was a lock for number one. Oh, there's no debate for Paolo over Jabari. And obviously that proved to be a smokescreen because Orlando took him number one, Paolo, right? But, and it just felt like the media was overlooking what or Jabari struggled with, which was passing and dribbling. And then they just didn't look at what Paolo did great and overlooked his moderate at most concerns. This happens in the NBA and this happens in the NFL. And this year, Scoot Henderson, he hasn't had a perfect season, right? He's missed 25 plus games. He is shooting 33% from three, and he's a 6'1" guard. Totally understand those things. And those are reasons why I haven't quite said he's this generational guard prospect. Like I wouldn't take him ahead of Cade Cunningham 2 years ago. Honestly, like I loved LaMelo Ball in 2020. I would have had a tough time between those two. Like I think Scoot is an excellent prospect in that LaMelo Ball tier as a prospect from my personal evaluation. I think most people would take Scoot over LaMelo as prospects. So he has concerns, but let's not forget he is 6'1", 6'2" with a 6'10" wingspan. He is a freak athlete who is growing rapidly as a playmaker with his patience. His jump shot from midi is money. He is competitive. He's got all the tools you want. Like, great. He's 6'2". It doesn't really affect him that much because he has a 6'10" wingspan. And look at Manu Quickly defensively. That isn't affecting Quickly defensively. And he and Scoot and Quickly have very similar physical measurables, right? So I know people are saying like you're comparing to Emmanuel Quickly. I'm not taking him too, but like I'm talking like defense. Like Scoot's defense could be fine if he's engaged and all those amazing tools he has. He's just a better prospect than Brandon Miller. Brandon Miller is 21 months older than Scoot Henderson is. He's 21 months older. And I don't think what he's done in college this year is more impressive than what Scoot did in the G League this year, despite Scoot not having a perfect season. So we're doing that thing where we overthink it. And look, I think after Brandon Miller's March Madness debacle, to say the least, he shot 8 for 41 in March Madness. I don't think this is going to be as big of a question as it was a few weeks ago, but because, I think he would have needed an excellent March Madness to realistically have a chance to go second. But now it's like becoming clear Scoot's number 2 for me. It's not even close. And I think that the fact that it was a question, like I think we were jumping the gun on Brandon Miller, even though I do think he has earned the 3rd overall pick nod, even though we've talked about this. I love Cam Whitmore. I am intrigued by Amin Thompson. Like, I don't think it's a lock either. He's my 3rd prospect at the end. So, yeah, I think every year we jump the gun a little bit on prospects, and I think we did that a little bit with Miller, even though I do think he deserves recognition as a high draft pick.
Yeah, and 3 biggest games of his career, March Madness. What was, like you said, 841? That's like 19% from the field.
19.5.
9 points per game. Like he had some minor injuries there too.
Yep, the groin,
yeah,
that matters.
Scoot obviously dealt with a lot of injuries throughout his season as well. One note I have on Scoot, and I've kind of thought about this whole year when I'm watching those games. That G League Ignite team was really bad. Like he didn't have much help on that team at all. And I think partly, I don't know, like this definitely affected his numbers a little bit. And I think if he had a better team surrounding him and more, threats around him, he'd be viewed a little bit better, especially when it comes to like finishing at the rim and stuff like that. Because the spacing just wasn't good. He had multiple defenders collapse on him a ton because teams just wouldn't take, his teammates as seriously compared to maybe, some past G League Ignite players that would be bigger threats. Like he had all the pressure on him. He's playing pro basketball. He was 18 this year and he was 17 last year. He's got 2 years of pro basketball under his belt and he's been impressive in both. He's almost 2 years younger than Brandon Miller. That's 20 more months of development that you can give, a Scoot Henderson. I'm pretty comfortably locked in with him as my number 2 guy. I feel really good about him year 1 being like a 16, 15 per game guy that can be at least a secondary playmaker at the NBA level right away. Love his athleticism and defensive intrigue. But yeah, I think it will be definitely more of a question come draft time when we're talking about, who's going number 3, because I don't know, even if the Pistons land 2, I wouldn't understand why they would stick there and take Brandon Miller. I think you're really giving up a lot of potential assets to where you could trade back and, maybe the team at number 2 really wants Scoot Henderson, and then you're going to force them to trade up. Maybe you blackmail them by saying we're going to draft Scoot Henderson if you don't trade up. Like, I don't know. I really can't see a team actually picking Brandon Miller at number 2, even if it's the Pistons. Like, they would just trade back, in my opinion.
Yep, absolutely. And I heard every word you said. I was blowing my nose. Yeah, and one thing, I listened to the Jonathan Givony podcast you referred to a few minutes ago,
Mhm.
and I just want to make one point that frustrated me with what he said, even though I have so much respect for Jonathan.
Yeah, he's good. He's good.
He's great, but
Yeah.
he was talking about Scoot Henderson not being locked in every single game and saying that is a concern. And can I just say, like, we put way too much stock into that with 19-year-old kids. And here's what I mean. Paolo Banchero, they said the same thing because he wouldn't bring the same intensity on a Tuesday night against a South Carolina Central or something. Right? Anthony Edwards 2 years ago. That was an
Yep.
indictment on Anthony Edwards
Oh, he was getting flamed.
because he was not bringing it against a bad team when he was playing with a bad team himself, when honestly he was the number 1 pick, right? Or at least the top 3 pick. What the best way to determine if a player has that competitive factor is when you put them in big moments and see when they're focused. I saw Scoot Henderson against Victor Wembanyama
Crazy
absolutely
game.
play excellent, and he brought this energy and this fire. His competitiveness is not a question. We saw what Paolo Banchero did in March Madness last year. He dominated in the biggest moments. Now, am I saying that it's justified that these kids are not focused on these lower touted games? No, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that is more of a reflection of maturity that comes with time and better coaching than this kid not having it. Like, if this kid in March Madness is still not bringing intensity, like, yeah, then that should be a very valid question. But when kids are coming out and playing great when the moments matter the most, when the lights are the brightest, I'm not going to have competitiveness as a question. We saw what Anthony Edwards was brought in the playoffs last year, right? We saw what Paolo had in March Madness. These aren't kids that lack competitiveness. These are kids who, at this point of their career as kids, they're still
Being
figuring
kids.
out how to bring it every single game when the games feel like they don't matter as much. And that is not a long-term problem unless you make it a long-term problem.
Yeah, 100% agree with you there. And I mean, yeah, I think Anthony Edwards, I think he averaged 26 a game in his playoffs last year as a 20-year-old. Paul Banchero, Final Four run with Duke.
And he
Like,
was the best player in that
yeah,
tournament.
yeah, absolutely. He was really dominant. Then they had a chance to go to the national championship game if Mark Williams could make free throws. But yeah, I don't get that. I feel like people are just nitpicking with Henderson.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make sense. I don't get why we were nitpicking with Boncaro last year either.
That made no sense to me. That made no sense.
Like people were saying Boncaro wasn't a good enough athlete last year. That was one of the big concerns.
Oh,
Like,
gosh.
what in the world? Or what are we talking about there? He was how much does he weigh? Like 260 ish, and he's like 6'10", and he can still put you on a poster. Like he's a physical beast. One of his biggest strengths in college was his post and his post game and how he could dominate down there. Like
Mm-hmm.
his physicality is a strength in the NBA. He's a 6'10" machine right now.
Yeah.
Like that didn't make sense. And I think I think some people were really starting to nitpick when it came to Scoot Henderson. Never made sense to me. And, that will happen next year's class. It's going to happen every year. It
It's
happens
going to
every
happen
year.
every year.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't get it. We pick guys to nitpick things on. We ignore others' concerns. That's what happened here. I think we're starting to come more to the end of this, though. There's going to be people that argue, Miller could be a second pick still, but I think it will probably start to die down now with his March Madness performance and
I,
such.
I don't want this to be a crap on Miller topic. I don't think that's what
Yeah,
it is. I
he's
think
the top 3 prospect.
my concern level from that March Madness performance is maybe a 5 out of 10. Like it was a moderate concern for me. I'm not like freaking out because I don't know if you've ever had a groin injury, but groin injuries suck. They suck. You know why? Because it feels like every single movement, like your body just like it tightens. It stinks. And in basketball, when you're constantly moving, that's a difficult injury. And I think the bigger reasons why I don't think Brandon is a better prospect is because he doesn't have the same physical pop or creation separation, and he's 22 months older. Those are the reasons why. It is not because he stunk in March Madness. The way he would have moved up to that tier of a Scoot Henderson is if he was the best player in March Madness. Then it's like, okay, we can have a conversation. But that's what it required. So instead of like viewing this as that hurt his stock, I think it leveled his stock. That's where I'm at with it. So I think Brandon Miller, his excellent shooting, I think his growing comfort from 2-point range and off the dribble, those are very notable. And his playmaking instincts. I think Brandon Miller is a stud, but we're doing the same thing. It's like the mosquitoes who keep getting buzzed because they run into the light. This is what we do with scouting. We question their competitiveness, and we have no idea how to evaluate competitiveness because you got to balance immaturity and competitiveness. You can have an immature kid not lock in every single night. That happens. Most people are like that. You know their competitiveness when you play up to competition. That's when you know who kids are. And if Anthony Edwards and Paolo Banchero haven't taught people that, then I don't know what to tell you. So, in addition, Scoot wasn't super efficient in the G League. Fine. But guess what? Like you said, he has some of the worst spacing in college basketball. Jalen Green dealt with it. Jaden Hardy dealt with it last year. Anthony Edwards dealt with it. And by the way, to the Edwards point, yeah, his competitiveness was up and down because he rarely played in the biggest matchups in college basketball playing at Georgia. So that was just a weird situation. Yeah. Like, I think if you saw Edwards out of Duke, I'm sure you'd have had a great March Madness run.
Oh, yeah.
So stuff like that. So long story short, I think Scoot's number 2. I think Miller's fantastic. I think he's number 3. But there's a conversation for Cam Whitmore, who I think is the closest thing to Ant, talent-wise, or just tools-wise. And then there's a conversation for Amin Thompson, who looks like a more athletic Penny Hardaway sometimes. And there's really talented guys. So I think at this point in time, I trust Victor and Scoot's sample size to lock them in at 1 and 2. But after that, you have a tier of 3 to 5 that is really fantastic. Kind of like 2019, where I think we try to lock in RJ Barrett too much at number 3. We had other studs like Darius Garland who deserve consideration, which I understand why RJ went 3rd. He was great his freshman year, and Darius played 5 games. But my point still stands, right? I think it's very similar where there in reality isn't much separation between 3 to 5 because, believe it or not, people, this draft is really good outside the top 2. It's a really good draft.
Yeah, and we can't underplay the fact that Scoot Henderson already has 2 full years of NBA-like training and some NBA kind of like competition at the G League level. He's been a pro basketball player for 2 years now, for crying out loud. Like, that has to be mentioned in the debate as well. I think that will, further prepare him for his NBA endeavors. But yeah, it was weird how this all started. I don't want to hate on Miller either. He's my number 3 guy still right now. Jabari Smith, when all this happened last year, he was still my number 3 guy last year. Yeah. Like, these are really good prospects. It's just annoying when, we try to nitpick about the people above them and try to tear them down.
Yeah, we get bored. I think that's what happens. I think we get bored. But yeah, like I said, long story short, great draft. Love Brandon Miller. I would take him 3rd right now. Scoot Henderson, I think would he put him in an NBA floor and he get real spacing around him? Like, he's going to have ups and downs his rookie year because he's a rookie point guard. But I think you're going to really see him pop before year 2. And, it's a really good class. I can't complain at all.
For sure.
Now we're an hour into this episode. Let's move into prospects in March Madness, Zach. I want to hear what you think. I'm going to kind of piggyback on you on this topic. Just tell me some of your prospect takeaways thus far from March Madness, other than Brandon Miller.
Yeah, obviously we talked about Brandon Miller. Obviously, somebody that I am becoming an insane fan of right now is Jordan Hawkins. He's got a case to be my draft crush this year. Last year it was Tara Eason. We're getting close with with Hawkins right here. He has been really good in March Madness. He's been averaging 17 points per game. He's helped led UConn to the Final Four. They play on Sunday
Yep.
against Miami. He has been awesome. Let me know what you think about this. Is there? I think in the NBA right now, the only player that can come off screens, shoot the ball as fast as he can, as high as he can jumping, and make it as well as he can is Stephen Curry.
I won't go that far because there's a guy named Klay Thompson.
Yeah.
And then Trey Murphy, I think, is going to be the next up in line with that. And then there's Desmond Bane. But I've only watched one March Madness game of him thus far. I watched the Gonzaga game, and he absolutely killed them in the second half. Like that first half was kind of close. And then second half, they went full bonkers, and he was just running off screens and just nailing them. Yeah, I think Hawkins, one of those guys who really talented shooter from the outside, still figuring out his physicality around the rim, still figuring out just the overall NBA. Like he's not in the NBA yet. He's 6'5", 195. I think he's going to struggle early on with the physicality and finishing, but there's definitely a lot of stuff to like there in terms of his movement and his shot making. And I thought he had an edge to him watching him in March Madness. I'm excited. He's one of those guys I was thinking about the other day, just getting a couple of days of just watching tape on him, because I haven't gone full in on tape watching on him, but I did watch him against, Gonzaga, and it was hard not to be impressed in the second half with his shooting. But yeah, I think he definitely has a case to be a first round pick.
I mean, more than a first round pick. I think this guy might be going lottery. I mean, he's shooting. That's what I think he's been getting rumbles with lottery recently. He's getting a March Madness push. I know our buddy Isaac of Global Scouting has been kind of talking about that too. Yeah, he's shooting 51% from three in March. But yeah, the whole point, I think after a year, he's at worst like a top 5 movement shooter in basketball off of screens, just with his insanely quick release. He gets so high on his shots, and then his make rate is insane. I think I would take him. I think Grady Dick is probably the better just like catch and shoot spot up guy, but overall I'd maybe go Hawkins as the best shooter in the class when you just take shooting as a whole and not just like spot up shots. But he's been really impressive. I know you're a big fan of Cason Wallace. He only played 2 games, obviously, but 14 a game, really big game against Kansas State. Kentucky guards, I mean, they perform better.
It's a thing.
It's a NBA. Thing. They do. He's an extremely fierce perimeter defender. I think he is going to be day one a good defender in basketball, kind of like a Davion Mitchell type. But
he's 6'5", and he's not.
Yeah, but he's multiple inches taller, and I think he's gonna be a better offensive player in general. Didn't get as much. I mean, more at the end of the year, he was starting to get more playmaking opportunity. But he played next to Severe Wheeler, who's a pretty solid guard at the college basketball level that took a lot of on-ball opportunity. I think he can be a solid shooter in the NBA. I think he can slash at moments. Like I think he's got a case to be a top 10 pick, and I think he's a really high floor player that's going to give you really nice defense day one. He can be a secondary playmaker, and he can hit open shots. I think a lot of teams would absolutely love a guy like that.
Yeah, I think Cason Wallace is a lottery guy. I just think guys like that win in the NBA. When you're a big guard who can just guard the point of attack and run off screens and just be an absolute beast, like he can get 2 steals in a game in the NBA pretty quick. Like there's a little bit of Drew Holiday, a little bit of DeAnthony Melton, like all those stereotypical, like just excellent point of attack, rotational guards. And then like I think Drew Holiday is like literally it's becoming like whenever you compare a tall shot maker who's skinny, you compare him to Kevin Durant. I think when you're comparing like a really big, just really solid offensive guard who can really defend, Drew Holiday is the aspirational comp now. But I just think he's one of those guys, like he might be a great role player and he might be a good starter. That's probably the range I have him in. And I don't know. I just don't think there's going to be 14 players in the draft better than him. So I would take
Yeah.
him in the lottery.
And then another lottery guy, you got Jarace Walker from Houston, 13 a game in the tournament, 40% from
He's
the
a
field,
beast.
4 blocks a game. He was a menace on defense. If I had to make a big board today, like on the spot, I haven't done all my prospects. I've done like 8 like full on prospect evaluations so far. I haven't done him yet. But he would probably be like my 6 right now. I think he's going to go around 6 in the draft. I think I do have questions about his offense. At his ceiling, I don't know what he is really. I think he's at best a tertiary scorer. Like I don't think he could ever be like a second option in the NBA. But I think he could give you like 13, 14 a game within a few years. And I think he has all NBA defensive upside, maybe even more. Like he's a dynamic defender. He can block shots. He's got, quick feet. There's some intrigue on offense with him being, 6'8", 240 and with an okay handle, and he can space the floor kind of.
And he can
So
pass and
yeah,
he's
he can pass
strong.
it too. Um, I thought he had a pretty solid tournament. Someone that I'm not very happy with their tournament, and this player really needed a good tournament because, I mean, he had a lot of question marks this year, a lot of injuries. Nick Smith Jr.
Yeah.
He missed a lot of the year with injuries. He had some inconsistent games. It was either like he's kind of like Jordan Poole in a sense. He's dropping 30 or he's not doing much for you. He can be a really talented scorer at points. Obviously, the rim pressure is not there. He's got a pretty good floater. That's really where his finishing's at. He doesn't really like contact. He had a really bad tournament, 5 points per game in those 3 games. A lot of benchable moments with unplayable defense. He's going to be a really bad defender at the NBA level, and
Yeah.
I feel like he'll probably end up going the lottery still because of the with the upside when it comes to the offensive, creation.
That
And
makes no sense to me.
you don't think so? I
How
think he
does Jaden
probably
Hardy
still
go
is.
37th overall, then Nick Smith goes lottery? What did Nick Smith this year prove that Jaden Hardy didn't last year? What did Nick Smith do? Are we just going to hide on the injury excuse? Are we going to do that right now?
I think that's what teams might do. I mean, I could have
Oh, but he's
taken
6'5",
Hardy.
180 and thin. Like, what suggests that isn't going to be a persistent problem?
Maybe. Like
I
just
don't
I feel like
understand it.
I still think a team will probably, I don't think he'd be a top 10 guy. I don't know if I would take him lottery personally. I don't think he's a guy I'd really want on my team because I can't stand, guys who are just going to get targeted on defense, like 100% of the time, like he's that bad of a defender. But I think some team might, just fall in love with the scoring. I don't know, even though he's had some really bad moments this year. He's an interesting guy. Another guy, kind of
Wait, can
similar
we slow
arc.
down? Can we slow down on this?
Yeah.
Talk about Nick Smith right now because I think the perplexing thing with me on him is one, I thought he was be a way better finisher than he was in college.
Yeah.
I think I got deceived by some tape in high school, but I think the problem with Nick Smith is you think about the values that player brings, right? A player that archetype. How impactful is it when a player is, a scorer at heart, right? Doesn't put much pressure on the glass. Is it going to be necessarily efficient running your offense? He's going to be targeted on defense most likely, and he can't put pressure on the rim. Let's talk about that. Even if that player becomes a 20-point per game scorer, how valuable is that player actually?
I think the only spots where I'd like want that guy is maybe as like a 6-man microwave
Yeah.
scorer to get buckets. Like, I don't know if I'd want that guy starting night in and night out for me. I mean, we're talking that's like a worse version of Jordan Poole probably because I mean, at least Jordan Poole, he's like the best free throw shooter in the league and he can finish at the rim.
Yeah, Jordan Poole is a way better finisher.
Yeah.
And by the way, Jordan Poole would be the aspirational comp, and I did my top 100 players ranking. I had him in the 80s. So,
Yeah.
I'm struggling to see the upside. I have durability questions, and I question just how is he going to impact the game consistently. And
Mhm.
like a Keason Wallace, I know he's going to bring me defense every game.
Yep.
What is Nick Smith going to bring me game in and game out? And look, maybe he doesn't have that right now. Great. Then what is the upside here? And a guy who just can't finish around the rim, I just don't prioritize those players very much. So
Yeah, I
I
feel you.
struggle to see the vision. And I think in March Madness, I wasn't encouraged. Like before March Madness, he had a good 5 game run. But I think that's what Nick Smith is as a player personally. I think he's going to have streaks where he averages 17 in 5 games on good efficiency. Then
Mhm.
he's going to be a player you just can't play if you want to win. So I don't value that archetype personally. And that's the reason why, in addition to the durability questions, I wouldn't take him in the lottery.
And then we can go to another,
Hardy
kind of
was a way better prospect.
yeah. And then we got Keontae George from Baylor, who had a rough tournament. I believe he averaged 8 points a game on 15% shooting. He had two really, really bad games. I think he went like 2 of 12 in the first one, like one for 11 or whatever in the first round. I don't know how much it drops his stock. I think he's probably a top 10 prospect for me still. I really like some shot creation and off ball shooting upside. I think he can be a playmaker at the NBA level. I think he can be an okay defender as well, somebody that won't hurt you, maybe upside to be somewhat solid. Um, I was really unhappy with his shot selection throughout the year, and that really definitely hurt his numbers. I talked about this last episode, I believe it was too. I don't understand why that Baylor staff allowed him to shoot the shots that he was taking. His shot selection had to be one of the worst in college basketball. It was unbelievable. Um, but yeah, I mean, I still like him as a prospect. I think there's a ton of upside there, but there's legit concerns with that shot selection.
Yeah.
With the efficiency at times and at moments with a lack of consistency on the defensive end.
I like Keontae George. I would probably take him lottery. I don't know if he would be top 10, but I would take him lottery. I think there are legit questions about is he athletic enough to create space in the NBA?
Yeah,
And if if he does create space, he's not going to blow by you. So is his jump shot good enough for you to hit those shots, those tough shots that he'll probably need to make? But I'll say this: I think the scoring flashes are real. I think he's got an NBA body. I think even though he's not vertically gifted, he can finish through contact, and I think his pick and roll playmaking is legit. So I think he does bring stuff that suggests he could be a pretty darn good player. Now there's a pretty low floor there because there is an avenue where he just isn't an NBA type athlete, and he isn't a good enough shooter to make up for that. So there is definitely a low floor there, which is why I wouldn't take him top 10. Most likely, he'd probably be in that 12 range for me. But no, I like him, and I think he could be really good.
and then you got two other potential lottery picks that my opinion didn't really change on over their March Madness runs. You have Grady Dick, 13 a game on 45% from the field. He had a really good first game and then had a little bit of a rougher game against Arkansas,
He's good.
which, yeah, like Anthony Black is the other guy I want to talk about. He had a pretty good defensive game against him that game. Black averaged 3 steals a game in the tournament, 12 points per game. Not very efficient, though, 33%. I think both those guys can be lottery guys as well. I think Dick is probably I think he's probably a lottery lock. I think he could definitely go top 10. I think there's a lot of teams that could use that shooting. I think he'd be a really good fit with like the Magic. And
I'd be
then,
surprised if he doesn't go top 10.
yeah,
I
yeah,
would take Anthony Black top 10 too. His
I
defense
think I
is
would too.
he's really good and he impacts the game in all the little things, which I think we don't appreciate enough in the NBA. We love I think NBA teams appreciate it, but I think fans, we want the efficient shot making, we want the space creation, we want the aesthetically pleasing players, which is why a guy like Nick Smith is still really valued. But I think guys like Anthony Black, he's big. I think even though he's not thick yet, I think he will be. And he could just really defend. He's a connective player. He just feels like a really good glue player who's going to play
Yeah.
27 minutes a game in the NBA.
Yeah, I don't think that's a crazy take at all to, say that you would want a Black over, Keontae George because Black, he's going to be a really good defender. He's a 6'7" guard. I mean, there's been conversations of him being one of the best passers in this class, point blank,
Mm-hmm.
period. He's not a, he's, I mean, I have concerns about his shooting, but he's not a horrible shooter. Like, yeah, he's probably going to be one of the guys that teams are playing a little more drop coverage on early
Mm-hmm.
on because his shooting's probably not going to be there right away. But I mean, I think he can be a 12-ish point per game scorer in his first few years with amazing playmaking and good defense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that's worth a top 10 pick. And, especially with, he's a 6'7" guard. Like, big guards
Yeah,
are awesome.
for sure. No, I think our guy Kyle Anderson, I think you look at him and think Anthony Black could affect the game in a similar way. And no, Black isn't going to be the guy with 4 million Instagram followers and all that stuff, but he's a player that who he could start on a really good team.
Yeah.
So that's valuable. I really like him. And if his jump shot becomes consistent, then all of a sudden you're talking about a guy who's going to make over $20 million a year at some point.
Yeah. Like if, let's say, like the Knicks, we talked about this earlier, like the Knicks got the lottery pick from the Mavericks. Like,
Yeah.
Anthony Black would be one of the first guys I think of, to draft, for the Knicks to draft a guy like him, or like some like competitive playoff team to draft Black, because I think he can impact a playoff team positively compared to, like a Keontae George or other guys that maybe are higher than him in the prospect rankings. But I think Black just has a more, a team-like play style that impacts winning, earlier in his career and maybe more in general.
Let's look at the 8 to 14 range in this draft right now. Tell me what team he doesn't work on. Does he work in Washington? I think we agree.
Yes.
Probably in a similar mold to Denny Avdia.
Mm-hmm.
Would he work in Utah?
Yeah, I mean,
they might want more upside than an Anthony Black, but
yeah, I mean, he works there for sure. I think he'd be a good fit.
Orlando be kind of a redundant spot for him. I don't like him in Orlando. New York, I think he could help there.
Mm-hmm.
New Orleans, he's kind of like Dyson Daniels is a similar player. I think that'd be redundant. Oklahoma City, I think that'd be a really big get for them.
I agree.
And then Toronto, obviously, they love their big switchable playmakers. So, and then you go beyond the lottery because these guys could slip too. I mean, the Lakers, like,
yeah, they would do insane things to get an Anthony Black on that team. He'd be really good. Yeah,
in Atlanta, I think that would be another good spot. Like, he's one of those guys who fits on 70% of teams in the NBA.
Yep.
So I'm very impressed by him.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Anybody else?
I don't think I wrote anybody else down. Let me check. I mean, not off the top of my head, really, honestly. I think that's all the lottery type guys. I'm probably being stupid and forgetting about somebody right now. I mean, you can talk like, Marcus Sasser, but he's more of a late first round pick for Houston. There's a lot of seniors that you can maybe talk about, like an Oscar Tshiebwe, Drew Timme.
What about Chris Murray?
They got eliminated round 1. I can't remember how he did there. I think he's definitely a first round pick. I think he's a winning player day 1 too. I think he probably goes late teens, early 20s. I don't really have a full gauge on him though yet as a prospect. I have to look into him more.
What do you think of Jalen Hood-Schifino?
Oh yeah, I should mention him. I think he could be, a lottery type guy. I've heard a lot of lottery hype as of late. He did a really good job stepping up in a role that needed to be filled for Indiana this year, next to Trace Jackson Davis. I think he can be a solid 3-level scorer as a facilitator as well, and a potential defender with some upside. I think he's a really dominant mid-range scorer as of now. I think that's one of his strong points. I think he could be a lottery type guy.
I really like Derek Lively as well.
Yes. I should. He
reminds me of like I think he could change. I think he can alter a game so like a Yankee Kongu can, where he's just like a super active and switchable defender. He's a little bigger than Onyeka, so I think he's a better interior guy, and I think he can switch a little better. Obviously, Onyeka Okongwu was more productive offensively in college than Derek Lively, but I think their roles in the NBA would be similar. So I don't think the scoring difference would be as significant as it was in college. So,
Mhm.
I was really impressed by him. He's another guy I would consider back into the lottery,
Mhm.
but maybe not lottery. Like he's in that borderline range. But yeah, there's a lot of other guys like Quavion Smith. I thought
Yep.
he had a down sophomore year, but he was really impressive in March Madness. And go down the line. I mean, Tariq Whitehead.
I thought he had some nice games. He played better in March Madness than than on average in his regular season. I mean, I think some team could fall in love with him and take him the lottery. I would not be surprised if he went lottery. Not sure if I would take him there necessarily, but I wouldn't be shocked if he went there. I think he can be a floor spacer for sure day one. I think he's still a nice athlete. I think he's got a good defensive motor. Like, I think
He
he
can
could be
really shoot it.
I think he would be a great role player on a playoff team right away. I think he can just fill roles. And
I,
then Filipowski, I think that's a double machine potentially at, his peak. Like that dude, he's like 6'11", it might be 7 foot actually too. He can space the floor, rebounds the ball well, he can score. Like, I think he could be a good guy that is also a lottery threat. Duke's got several guys. Proctor recently is not. He said he's not going to the draft. He's returning to Duke. He was a, maybe late first round, early second round guy. Yeah, Duke's got a lot of guys.
Absolutely. And I'm going to end the show here. So we'll do the normal stuff like the would you rather build around and draft trivia going forward. I think that's those are more fun topics with 3 guests.
Yeah.
So we'll probably do those in the following weeks. We'll usually have 3 guests. We have some pretty good guests lined up in the
Yes,
future.
sir.
So stay tuned for that. But Zach, is there anything else you want to say before we end the show?
I don't know. I'm excited. There's a lot of big storylines, mainly surrounding this Western Conference plan
Oh my
over the
goodness. It's
next few weeks.
crazy.
It is
Crazy.
awesome. I mean, I hate that my team is one of the storylines because there's a lot of pressure on us, and I don't like that. But,
Pressure good.
yeah, pressure can be good, but yeah, sometimes I don't like it. I wish. I mean, obviously, I wish we were like a top 4 seed, but it's all right.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for listening, of course, as always, and we'll see you next week.